Okay, good afternoon, everyone.
Hi.
Hi. First of all, I'd like to thank Chief Walder and Chief Glover and Nikki Hicks for being here. I'm Princess Lucas Wilson, for those of you who do not know me, and our President, Dr. Karen Harden, would like to say a few words, and then we'll get started with the forum. So thank you so much for being here. And also thank you to our committee members for being on the call. So Dr. Harden.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Hope you will continue joining our membership meetings on a monthly basis. Just quickly to let you know that we are the Maricopa County branch. We are branch 1011. We are over 100 years old. We are the premier branch in this area. There are two other branches. So when we talk about the NAACP, just letting you know that we need to be specific about which branch are we referring to. We are the Maricopa County branch, and we do what we do, right? And we do it with style and grace. I'm not sure if we have some special guests. I'm not sure if they're on the call yet, but I want to thank the Malone family because they donated 5,000 N95 masks to the Maricopa County branch in NAACP. Please continue to watch your listserv, your announcements that come out, because we will be planning an event to help get those masks out into the community. And without delaying any further, we have some great panelists. Thank you, panelists, for joining us. As you know, I say this is the best of times and it's the worst of times. Worst of times when we had insurrection at our United States Capitol. Best of times because we have leaders and a commander-in-chief who says the things that they want to do align with the mission of the NAACP. The NAACP is a nonpartisan organization. We look for people who administer policies that align with what we believe in, justice and equality for all. At this time, I'd like to turn the program over to our third vice president, Princess Lucas Wilson, and thank you for organizing this program for us today. Okay.
All right. Thank you, President Harden. Again, thank you to our special guest. And again, my name is Princess Lucas Wilson. I'm the chair of the Criminal Justice Law Enforcement Committee. And again, thank you to our committee members who are here. And with our particular branch, what we try to do on a regular basis is to have these types of forums to promote communication and to help us learn what's going on with the various departments and also with any community concerns. So we're here today to talk about policing and public safety. And we know that there's been concerns, past and present, related to public safety from police departments as well as from the community. And with that, our branch has worked with the police departments that are represented on the panel. And we've worked with Chief Glover. Congratulations, Chief Glover, on your appointment as chief. And I worked with Chief Glover when he was Commander Glover. And we worked on several workshops related to police safety, particularly focusing on young people, how to interact with the police safely. We did that on ASU's campus and also within the community, along with Noble the National Organization for Black Law Enforcement. So pleased to have you here. And Nikki Hicks, we've worked together as well, continue to work together. And the Phoenix Police Department has made strides in transparency and putting forth certain initiatives and continue to work to communicate with our various communities on safety, as with the other departments. And most recently, our particular branch, we are part of a pilot policy review committee. And so we have the opportunity to look at internal policies and make recommendations. We've also been involved in city council calls related to proposed ordinances and on and on. So we're so grateful to have Nikki here as well and look forward to our continued work together. And for Scottsdale, the Scottsdale Police Department, I was looking for you, Chief Walter. Is that how to pronounce your name, Walter?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay, all right. And welcome to your new job. And I understand Chief Rodbell retired and he participated in our last forum. So we also work with the Scottsdale Police Department in their community meetings, learning about what's happening in Scottsdale and sharing any information that we feel would be prevalent. And hope to continue to work with the Scottsdale Police Department. So we're so grateful to have you here. And I don't know if I should say welcome to the Valley. I don't know if you are from somewhere else. A lot of people are from somewhere else here. But welcome to the Valley, if that's appropriate, and definitely welcome to the meeting.
Thank you.
So we'll give each of our guests a chance to say a bit more about themselves. And just in setting some of the tone for the meeting, we know that language can be limiting. And sometimes when we're trying to talk about very complex issues, our words are limited and words can be triggering depending on your experience. So we are charged with trying to be as patient as we can as we listen to different perspectives in order to move things forward. Along with working with the various police departments, another thing that the Maricopa County branch does is we also work with churches, and we've had some forums at churches. We've done some educational presentations at churches, and those requests really increased after the killing of George Floyd. So we've been doing that as well. So we have a educational component in terms of social justice to what we try to do. And we will continue to do that. And lastly, we have a book club that we've started. The Criminal Justice Public Safety Committee has started to kind of help people read about various issues that they may not be familiar with, because we have gotten that request over and over from the public. So in addition to doing presentations, we have a book club. This is our second book club meeting, and the book is called Push Out. And if you're interested in participating in that particular book club meeting, is scheduled for February 23rd. So with that, if I can have the agenda pulled up, and we will go from there. And each of our guests, you all got copies of the agenda, correct? Okay, trying to make that a little bigger. Okay, all right, thank you. So our agenda today just, we have, there's like 4 basic questions, and we can go in any order that you like. So the discussion topics are, from a law enforcement perspective, how would you categorize what happened in the nation's capital? And a very important part of that is how can we stay safe as communities? And specifically, how can we stay safe as NAACP units and chapters? We know sometimes we're under scrutiny after the types of situations we've seen recently, with governors being threatened with violence, etc. The next question is current or additional initiatives planned by your respective departments to enhance public safety. And it's just a list of some things you may choose from, or you may want to share, something else. Those are just suggestions. Last question is, where do we go from here to increase our community's confidence related to public safety? And the Q&A session will be managed by chat, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. We will capture your questions and try to address them as a later date. So that's our agenda for today. Let's get started, and maybe let's start with Chief Walther, since you're new to us, and I don't know how New York to the Valley, as I said earlier. So if you would like to start and introduce yourself and start with the first discussion question. Thank you.
You bet. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I am not new to the Valley or Scottsdale PD. So I retired from the Scottsdale Police Department after 24 years in 2018, May of 2018. But then, Princess, I did move out of the Valley. My wife and I moved to a real small town in Arizona called Alpine, Arizona, a little up in the mountains, a little less than 200 year-round residents. And so I've been retired for about 2.5 years. Oh, I did retire as the Assistant Chief of Police for Scottsdale PD over uniform services and special operations in 2018. And then I got a phone call from the city manager in October, and he said, Jeff, I need you. I said, great, what do you need me for? He said, I need you to come back and be the chief. And so we had some great discussion about that. Chief Rodbell, great chief over a long period of time. He retired on November 30th, and I took over as the chief on December 1st. So I've been there now going on 2 months. It's been a very busy 2 months, but I'm happy to be back with you again. In fact, the last NAACP meeting that I went to prior to my retirement was with you all at the Maricopa County branch. And so I'm just happy to be back and happy to be back with you, and very happy to be on this panel. So I get the question all the time, how long am I going to be here? And I tell folks that it's up to 2 people, and I'm not one of them. It's my wife and the city manager. And so, but my guess in the conversations that I've had with the city manager, I'll at least be here through all of 2021, and we'll look what that looks like beyond 2021. So I think Jeff and I share the same. We got the same call, just at different times, to come back to our respective organizations. So it's great working with Jeff and Tempe again, and it's good working with my counterparts in Nikki and Phoenix PD. So let's talk about the first question. How would you categorize what happened in the nation's capital recently? I characterize it with one word: anarchy. It's a word that we don't like in policing. When you see what essentially it turns out, or starts as, what you hope it starts out as, which is a constitutionally protected protest for government redress per the Constitution, and watches that almost immediately devolves into chaos and lawlessness and law breaking. And so I watched it, I think, in shock, as everybody else did, as you know, citizens of our country stormed one of the kind of the hallowed halls of the Capitol building, and tried to then force their way from through door after door after door, ultimately leading in a shooting, other injuries. The person who was shot was killed. And so, yeah, I looked at it from both a law enforcement perspective and as a citizen of this country, and just again looked at it, shaking my head, thinking, where have we gone wrong again? Where you know, people come to assemble and to protest and to have their voices heard, only to watch that just to completely disintegrate into lawlessness. And again, if that's we've had this discussion many a times, if that's how we're going to attempt to solve our problems by storming the Capitol and creating and committing major crimes against other citizens and politicians in our country, well, then we're continuing to head down the wrong path. And so that's how I see it in terms of a law enforcement perspective. I will add an additional item in and let my other panelists discuss this as well, but I think it's important for us to talk about in terms about staying safe and how we stay safe at events like this. What I've watched over the last year or so, where our amazing citizens take to the streets, signs, protests. I think I'm a rare police breed, and I want to see people in the street and protesting things where they've been wronged, or like I said, constitutionally protected, peaceably protesting, and demand for government redress of wrongs against them. And so I welcome that. The problem that I'm seeing, I think that we're seeing in my profession and around the country, is that when people come out and hit the streets to protest, especially government inaction, issues with policing, what happens is then small groups of anarchists find their way in amongst the group, and then they want to sow the seeds of violence or domestic violence, extremism. Usually it's what you see is a small group of anarchists get in the middle of our protesters and then work very diligently at whipping that group into a frenzy over the period of hours until then it turns into what you had at the Capitol. And we saw the same thing at the Capitol. A small group of anarchists weave its way into the mix, start whipping that crowd into a frenzy, and before they know it, they're storming the Capitol and trying to break down the doors where our legislators are. And so you see this time and time again, whether it's the very far left anarchists or the very far right anarchists, they're weaving their way into peaceably assembled groups and trying to sow the seeds of even greater division. And so that's what we, I think, have to pay attention to and guard ourselves against as our citizens continue to appropriately, peaceably assemble. We're going to continue to see these very small groups of anarchists weave their way into these protests and to try to make things worse. And so I'll let my other panel members talk about that, but that's kind of the basics of where I'm going right now. Princess, I think you're still muted.
Nikki, Chief Glover, whoever would like to go next. Sorry, I was muted.
It's okay. I'll speak. Thank you, Chief Walther. And I definitely look forward to continuing working with you as well as with Chief Glover. It was great news for the both of you that you were selected for those roles. For those of you who are not familiar with me, I am the Community Affairs Specialist for the Phoenix Police Department. And that means that I'm serving in a very unique role because I'm a bridge between the community as well as the chief and the rest of the department. I do a little bit of everything. And I always like to say that I do almost everything except for carrying a gun and counting the money. So you can imagine I get the opportunity to touch a lot of the great projects and the work that is happening with the police department. I think that Chief Walther really covered a lot of great things when he talked about anarchy and constitutionally protected protests. I want to definitely second him when it comes to talking about the safety within the protest. So as all of you saw over the past year, we saw dozens of protests happening within the city of Phoenix, and we saw that expand out to our surrounding cities. Tempe and Scottsdale definitely got a little bit of a lot of what we were experiencing as well. And what we have found is exactly what the chief described. I've had many people reach out to me during the time of the civil unrest asking, should they come to downtown? Should they go into the central corridor? Should they show up at some of the activities that were happening around the valley? And I don't tell people not to do things, but to do things with caution. You have to practice situational awareness when you're out at these types of events, because as he said, not everybody shows up with the same intentions. And we see that. So one of the things that we found is often that people will come, they express their constitutionally protected rights. The sun is shining. It might be hot, but the sun is shining. It might hit dusk, but the sun is still shining. When that sun goes down, it turns into a different temperature. And we're talking about the temperature of those that are involved and those that are participating. So for those of you, especially as we roll into 2021, there's no way to know what's going to happen throughout this year. We're all wishing and hoping for the best. I think all of us got to have a little bit of taste of what 2020 was all about. But if something comes up to where you feel the need to go out and express your rights, make sure that you know those basic things. Who are you with? Why are you there? What is your game plan? And if you start to see things shift, look for those law enforcement officials that are out there. For Phoenix Police Department, we have the Community Response Squad, which is 2 squads of detectives who are specifically assigned to monitor demonstrations and events and to protect everyone's rights. And so for those of you who especially live and work in Phoenix, you may know some of those people. If you don't, we're happy to introduce you. But those are the folks that are out there in plain clothes. They're not out there with vests. They're there to try to help keep the peace. They're the frontline staff when it comes to those activities. We do a lot of work with them. And so I would definitely recommend know who those people are, because when you see us shift, that means that there's another shift coming. And our goal is to keep everyone safe. So absolutely, continue to express your rights, continue to speak up. That's how change happens. And that's with all departments and positions happening within government at all levels, but be mindful of where you're at and what's going on. I'll turn it over to Chief Glover.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. So yeah, I'm Chief Jeff Glover from the Tempe Police Department. I was with the organization for a little over 20 years, was an officer in Mesa prior to that, and lateraled into Tempe, but spent most of my career as a Tempe police officer. And when I had retired, I actually retired back in February, pre-COVID, 2020. And, I, just like Jeff, I had gotten the phone call. I believe it was August from the city manager. And so when I got that phone call, it was, hey, we would love to have you back. We need new blood. We need new leadership. We think that you could lead the department in the future and set things in the direction that we want them to go, along with working in collaboration with the community. And so I'm thankful that I've gotten the opportunity to be sitting in the seat. I've been the chief for a little over 3 months now. And like Jeff, it comes down to 2 people and how long I stay. It's my wife and the city manager. So we'll see how that goes. My wife pretty much trumps anything that goes on beyond the city manager. She's the true boss. So, and I'll dig into the first question in terms of the Capitol insurrection. And I think that if I had to describe that, I would say epic failure. A lot of failures that has occurred in that entire incident and the circumstances that transpired. And if you look at it, and I think anybody can see that they were not prepared for what took place. I had the opportunity, and as Princess, as you had mentioned, I'm a Noble member, national organization of Black law enforcement executives. The U.S. Marshal for the District of Columbia is also a Noble member and a friend of mine. And I had called him up and I was like, hey, what can you tell me? What happened out there? And his words were, it was completely an epic failure because nobody was prepared there at the Capitol Police. And we had offered up assistance a week prior because we were getting information through the FBI that there was something that was going to take place that looked like it could have easily gotten out of control. And so, I look at that and, and it's disappointing. I mean, it's really disappointing because I mean, we all know that the underlying issue in this is that if this was a BLM situation, that probably more would have been done. There would have been a plan in place. They would have, had more heightened security. But it was different because what they took for granted is they looked at this situation with the pro-Trump supporters and thought, well, it's not going to get out of control, and we've got this. It's not a situation where it's going to be anything that that negative is going to come out of it. And so they completely let their guard down. And so that's part of what I got out of the conversation with them. I think it's just important that, anytime that you're looking at how to stay safe within situations of whether it be protests or just in general, as Nikki had alluded to, with just situational awareness and knowing what's going on around you. But it's also a part of too is the coordination and how you plan, whether you're planning a protest. The things that you have to consider is, should I be working with the city? Should I be working with the police department in that plan? Because as Jeff had mentioned, that you sometimes will have anarchists that will come and just try and mingle in within your group and cause and create chaos. That is their whole objective. And you have to have a plan in place for that to be able to deal with those situations. So that way it doesn't turn a situation completely ugly for the people that you are trying to keep safe that are there peacefully to protest, because we want to work with you as a police department to go out there, to be vocal, to be able to have your constitutional rights to free speech and protest. But we don't want as anybody getting hurt. We don't want the community being hurt, protesters or the police officers that are out there. We're there for public safety, and that should be first and foremost. And so with that, I just with this whole thing that we're seeing, how things are evolving, it's just really interesting to see how we are having so many of these societal changes, and then how we as a police department are trying to make sure that we're keeping up with it. And like Nikki, I recently brought in a new community affairs specialist because we want to make sure that we're staying engaged with our community. But we also realize too that sometimes an officer going out there doing that is not the best way of handling it, because you have those that are not going to be trusting of us, of people in uniform. And so it's important that we have people that are civilian or professional staff to be able to work within the community and work with our community members to help bridge that gap. So it's such an important piece.
All right. Thank you. Is there an echo? No? Okay, thank you very much for answering the first question. And it's very important what you said about, of course, being aware of your surroundings. And it's great to know about the community response squads and the new community affairs specialists in Tempe. So thank you for that very important information. And, we have had a national call around safety for individuals and for our units by the NAACP. So there's other information related to safety. Okay, looking at the second discussion topic, the effects of COVID on the workload and workforce of police departments locally and nationally. And COVID has caused a lot of increased social ills. People can't get out of their homes. They're dealing with problems related to basic needs. It's just exacerbated a lot of problems. And one of the first places people call when they're in crises is the police department. And so just want to get a sense of how your workload has changed, how it's affected your workforce, and some general guidelines to the public in terms of when to call the police. Because it may be some situation where the police departments are not maybe the first place you should call for some issues. So let's address that question, and maybe we can we'll start with Nikki this time. Ms. Hicks.
Okay, well, I don't know about Tempe and Scottsdale, but the calls for service have not gone down in the city of Phoenix at all. So that is definitely one of the things that chief and executive staff have had to work through over the last year is balancing the COVID cases in the community as well as those cases within the department. So as you know, public safety services, those frontline essential staff, they're out there in the streets and the communities working directly with those that we serve. So that means that people are exposed. I'm pretty sure many of you saw it back in December when it was announced that both Chief Williams and the executive assistant chief had COVID. I think at this point, it feels as if it's easier to count who hasn't had COVID than who has had COVID. And it's just unfortunate. It really is, because we don't know how COVID will affect each person individually. When it comes down to patrol, what we have found is that you have a lot of supervisors who are having to figure out how do you maintain staffing. Like I said, the calls are not going down, so we have to ensure that there are enough officers at the patrol level that are able to respond. We have done a significant job in working to maintain our call response time for priority 1 calls, which we know are the most critical calls. But I would definitely recommend that, and that's something that Chief has, especially when it comes to behavioral health and mental health, been working throughout the past few years for us as a collective, as a whole community, to everyone to make a discernment about when is the right time to call the police. If it is genuinely not something that can be managed appropriately by a police officer, are there alternatives? So our department has taken a lot of strides to work better in terms of educating the community as well as educating our own staff. We have put forth a couple of different programs and pilot programs where we're educating people in our communication center. We have behavioral health professionals embedded in that center to help those dispatchers redirect those calls. I definitely have my notes around here somewhere, put everything in a line, but we have, upwards of 3,000 calls that have been redirected since we've started that. Because genuinely, after they make an assessment, it's not a police call for service. We actually need one of our behavioral health community partners to show up and provide assistance. What that looks like is that now those officers are back in service or did not have to go out to that call, so that someone calling with a genuine threat to their health or their safety, and that officer needs to respond, those officers are available to be there. So it takes organizations and meetings like this where we're educating one another about what those resources are. If you haven't educated yourself, spend some time on the internet, memorize the crisis line. If you have family members, post it on your own social media. Call this number. If someone's in crisis, know what resources are available to you. I was just having a conversation recently, and we were jokingly talking about which of our pastors is available 24 hours a day. Sometimes it might be a call to your pastor or whoever is the person as the lead of your faith beliefs that you could call in the middle of the night. I don't know that I can call my pastor in the middle of the night, but I know a couple I probably could. So sometimes we're just thinking through who's the best to call and working as families so that we can work on our own skill sets when it comes to conflict resolution and emotional intelligence, so that we can help one another and maybe we can resolve some of those conflicts on our own. I'll toss that over to Chief Walther this time.
Okay.
Perfect. Nikki, amazing. You took that in the exact direction I think that is really where this discussion needs to go related to COVID, because COVID has been many things, and we too have really not seen a drop in calls for service, but I will tell you, we have seen a change in those calls for service. There's significantly more domestic violence. There's significantly more interpersonal violence between people. There's significantly more road rage for those people that are out there. And so the direction that you took it is perfect, I think, because when we talk about that, COVID has merely added yet another layer in the mental health crisis in this country. And so all of our communities are seeing that, and the police tend to be the absolute catch-all when it comes to everything, including mental health. And instead of trying to push back against that, I really have looked at the agencies in the Valley have really, and in the state, have largely embraced that drive toward being much, much better at dealing with the mental health crisis. So for us, we've had the benefit of police crisis intervention services in Scottsdale since 1974, and that is master levels counselors embedded, 7 of them embedded in the police department. They are a unit inside the police department that we utilize every single day. We couple that with the 40-hour CIT, or crisis intervention training, that we've rolled out to as many of our officers, frontline officers and detectives as possible, to get as much of our, especially our patrol force, trained in that 40-hour course. That's always a moving target for me. And then we're getting ready to roll out kind of that third leg to me of the stool and the support for mental health in our community, which is a crisis response team. Phoenix has 2 of those units. Nikki, like so many other things, when Phoenix does some great things that we'll look at and say, we want to do that too. And so that's the third prong for us, is that we're rolling out that crisis response team of 4 detectives and a sergeant that'll respond to the emergency committal orders, follow up on mental health calls, and do field work in relation with the crisis intervention team folks and our PCIS. That's really, again, the other layer of COVID. We can talk about calls for service and what that looks like, or worse yet, and I think Jeff will probably can look at this and speak to this as well, but the expectation of our various city councils and governors to then enforce mask laws, social distancing, and especially for Scottsdale and Tempe, we have massive bar districts, bar and entertainment, nightclub areas, and the people that come in and out of those, are they wearing masks? Are they not wearing masks? Are there social distancing going on? And my council members who just get up in arms over it, and as Nikki and Jeff both know, when the council members are up in arms over how we're combating that, we're getting the emails from the city manager, from the council, what are we doing? And so COVID has been the perfect storm, not just in terms of seeing our fellow citizens get sick, or fellow employees get sick, and some of our citizens dying. It's now really just add another layer of mental health crisis, of response crisis, of finite resources and applying those to calls for service. And it's definitely stretching us thin, but I'll also argue it's making us better in how we respond and how we communicate and how we work collaboratively to get all these calls handled with disparate groups within the city. So I'll kick that over to Jeff for his thoughts, but thank you. And thanks, Nikki, for sending it in that direction.
Yeah, thank you. I think that they pretty much summed everything up. I mean, because you hit on all the things that I wanted to talk about as well. And Nikki, you definitely drove it in the right direction. We've dealt with our own situation in terms of just how to deal with the volume of calls that are coming in. You've got employees that are also getting sick, because remember, on top of COVID, right now we're in the middle of flu season. You've got strep throat out there floating around. You've got other issues that may come up that may cause an employee to have to call in. So there's a lot of different things that we're having to juggle, and those sergeants that are pushing those patrol squads out there are trying to come up with new ways of how to deal with the short staffing and to be able to keep up with the volume of calls that are coming in, as well as looking at and this is what we did, is that we actually had to go through, looking at certain tiers of how we are dispatching our calls and what we are going to go to and what we are not going to, just because of the fact that, there is so much that's coming through that, some of the calls that, and it actually has helped us because some calls that would come in that probably shouldn't be coming to us, we would respond to anyways. And so now
Right, right.
it's teaching the dispatchers because it's causing them to actually think about, okay, well, if this isn't something that I have to send an officer to, what other resource can I now delve into and send them to? And so, and that gets into a lot of the conversation of what Jeff and Nikki were talking about with the mental health piece and being able to partner with different providers and ensuring that we are connecting the people to the right services up front, from dispatch. And so, like, I believe the group that you guys are working with over in Phoenix is the Crisis Response Network. And so that particular group, we actually just met with them. I just met with them yesterday because we're looking to do the same model that Phoenix is doing. And just as Jeff had explained, that what's occurring in Scottsdale, where they're creating that mental health squad that has the CIT crisis intervention, training. We have actually, our department, we probably have over 60% of our patrol officers that are crisis intervention trained, but we're looking to create a crisis intervention squad or mental health squad so we can do the petitions and the pickup orders and be able to address situations with specialized officers who have specialized training that can deal with that, but then also working in concert with the Crisis Response Network and the clinical people that we have in place with our Care 7 group that go in and help out with a lot of the victims' rights piece. And so, all that in collaboration, I think is definitely something that, we're looking at expanding on how we deliver that service. And then the other thing that we're from a Tempe standpoint, we're looking at creating a wellness coordinator position because we have the mental health piece for just the general community, and nobody wants to be cooped up inside and everything, but that people get stir crazy, and so like the calls for service, as Jeff had alluded to, this your domestic violence calls, all these things are going up. Well, it also plays an effect on the employees as well, because they're cooped up just as well. They go back home and they're struggling with this whole pandemic. And so we want to make sure that we're putting out employees that are in the right mind frame to be out there doing the job, and that we're checking in on them, because this is a very tough time right now between social justice, between a pandemic. It's trying to make sure that we're keeping all of that balanced, and that the employees are in a good space when they go out there into the field to deal with what they have to deal with.
Okay.
Well, I can't talk to you about the mask stuff. I just did Jeff, and I don't know if you've had to do this yet. I had to do a presentation on how we're going to better enforce our mask proclamation. And because the council members were just, like, where's the enforcement? Where's the enforcement? And so we recently just had to do a whole presentation on that, on what our enforcement piece is, because as Jeff had stated, you have two, big entertainment cities with bars and a lot of students, a lot of college students. And it's, how do you keep that in check, and how do you keep that under control? And what things should you be doing in terms of, precautions? And so we've been, looking at all of those things and still continuously educating our community in Tempe.
All right, great. Thank you. Excellent information for the community on the resources that are there and the ones that have been developed. And just quickly, when I mentioned language and the challenges with it, when we talk about certain issues, a lot of times we're talking about the same thing. And what's just been presented has to do with looking at what the police department, what the essential services are, what realistically can be handled. And it points to reimagining how police departments are utilized. And some of those same types of initiatives dovetail into when we hear a term, defund the police, which can get certain people kind of upset about the term, but we're talking about the same things a lot of times. So that's why these types of meetings are so important. So with what you just said, it lets the community know that there's great effort right now with the police departments to try to handle the various types of calls and putting things in place to mitigate situations and to help communities. So thank you for that. Okay, the next question is current or additional initiatives planned by your respective departments to enhance public safety. And you've touched on a lot of these suggestions in your last responses. So just looking at that category, is there anything else you would like to add? And whoever would like to start.
I could start.
Okay.
Yeah, so in terms of what additional things that we can add for that particular category, and I know that Phoenix went through this recently, and we are currently in the process of our public safety task force, where we have community members that we're working with to look at the internal workings of the police department and collaborate with us on what are some of the things that are needed changes for the organization, whether it be policy or training, how we hire, recruit, things of that nature. And so just a couple of things that we're doing in terms of, like, for instance, hiring and recruiting. We're reaching out to a company through Noble that has an affiliation or a connection with all 107 historically Black college universities. And so we're looking at doing some recruitment through their platform to be able to ensure that we're bringing in a very diverse candidate pool. We're also looking at, as I had explained, the mental health aspect in terms of just being able to triage those calls for service that are coming in through like the crisis response network. But also, just to add to that, Tempe doesn't have any counselors that are embedded, I believe, like Scottsdale does, where they're embedded in the department that really the officers can lean on for their own mental health. And that's the reason why we want the coordinator, but we also want the psychologist that's embedded in the department as well. So we're looking at being able to do that. And some of these things are recommendations from the Public Safety Task Force. Others are things that we've been looking at as an organization, such as joining 8 Can't Wait and revamping our use of force policy and making some changes within the language of our use of force policy. To ensure that we're compliant with some of the things that progressively people want to see from their police department. And many of the members of the Public Safety Task Force were very happy about the changes that we had made. And so I think that overall it's about collaboration and being able to see what the community, who basically provides us the latitude of doing our job. And it's what they envision that they want to see from a police department. And so it's being able to carry that out. But it's the follow through piece. So it's like we have this task force going on. We're finishing up next week. Now it's going to be the implementation and following through what we've committed to. And we're already starting to hit certain benchmarks, which we're very proud of in Tempe, that with some of the recommendations that they have even discussed that we don't even have on paper, we're already starting to make those changes.
Thank you.
Nikki, if you're okay with it, I'll weigh in on it next. There is a question in the chat, though, that I'll just briefly talk about real quick, and it was about my comment, I think, earlier about more road rage, and Jeff backed that up as well. The question, though, is related to, even though there are fewer cars on the road, related to people being at home because of COVID. And the answer to that, in my experience now, is yes. There's other things that we're seeing too, in addition to the increased road rage, that a lot of people are working at home or should be at home. But the other thing, in fact, Phoenix PD just kicked out a great intelligence bulletin related also to one of our intelligence bulletins related to street racing. And the street racing phenomenon in the valley and in the state is insane. And so even though people are supposed to be, you know, or technically at home or working from home, fewer cars on the road, yes, we are seeing more people who've been cooped up and are angry and they're frustrated, and they're taking that out on each other in road rage incidents. And then there's been a big push via Snapchat and Instagram, YouTube for street racing that has just taken the state, the valley, and the country by storm. And we have seen now multiple, in Scottsdale, multiple fatal collisions related to street racing of some really nice cars. And it's souped up cars or it's supercars. It is just constant. And I get from city council questions related to, is this just a phenomenon for us? And I think they're astounded when I tell them, absolutely not. This is huge in the valley, to the point where, like I said, Phoenix kicked out a great intelligence bulletin yesterday. We've been kicking out bulletins related to that. And it's amazing, even though people in theory are at home or driving less road miles, the violence on the road and the fatalities related to street racing are insane. I'll just piggyback very quickly some of the things Jeff was talking about, because what's nice about these close partnerships, Phoenix, Tempe, Scottsdale, Mesa, Chandler, Gilbert, we all spend time, Jeff and I see each other at least once a month via the East Valley Chiefs meetings, and we share ideas, and it's exactly like that. I'll you know, Nikki and Phoenix PD will have an idea that we'll bounce around and excuse me, East Valley Chiefs, and we'll say, hey, that's a good idea. I want to do that. Or Tempe's doing something great, or Scottsdale's doing something great. Hey, let's roll that out. And that's what's nice about the relationship that we have in the law enforcement community and with NAACP and other groups in the Valley that we get ideas from. And we put, I'm going to tell you, this right here is the picture of humility. And so, so I know that's not often the case, but I think most of the agencies in the Valley possess the understanding and the requisite humility to recognize those things that we need to do, and we need to do right for each other, for our citizenry, for our fellow human beings. And so it's great to always see these things replicated in each of the different organizations. I'll finally just touch on the last thing is officer-involved shootings and transparency with the community. Is for us, what's most important in that is that we've done this for years and continuing to work on this, is that we have citizen representation on our use of force review boards, on our major incident review boards that review all of our officer-involved shootings. They're not just there to watch, they're voting members, they participate in the discussion, and if we did something wrong, they're the first to tell us. That citizen involvement is absolutely essential to the transparency and the legitimacy of law enforcement in our state and in our country, and it's something that we're continuing to work on. Along with us, like Jeff, I think when you get fresh blood into an organization, you look at what does community engagement look like, and it sounds like Jeff and Tempe rolling in somebody else into the public information office. Oddly enough, Jeff and I haven't even talked about this, but I'm doing the same thing. I'm rebuilding our community engagement. I'm calling it community engagement section within the public information office that is about our footprint in social media, that is about digital content and producing, so that we can get videos out to our citizenry and to the organization when we have major critical incidents. Phoenix is doing this already. LAPD really pioneered the idea of critical incident debriefing videos to the citizenry to show that transparency. And these are all things that we're moving forward with in Scottsdale PD. It sounds like Jeff is doing the same with Tempe PD. And Nikki, you guys are already doing some of these, which is absolutely fantastic. And the partnerships are great. So thank you.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. And we do receive information about the critical incident reports from Phoenix PD. And I've sat on that committee when we used to view the incidences, and that's shared with the community consistently. And so that's a great help, and it helps to get information out to to give a kind of a factual picture, because as I said earlier, these topics are emotional. So it helps the community to know what happened. Yeah. So thank you. Great information, so much great information. The last question on the agenda, and we have questions in the chat, is just basically where do we go from here to help communities feel safer, related to policing and public safety. And y'all have covered a lot of great initiatives you've already started, but going forward, we can always work at doing more, or work at adding things or replacing what's not working. So that's a general question. And after that, maybe we can get to a few questions in the chat. And I've asked one of our committee members, Carla Boatner, to help out with the chat. So after addressing the last question, where do we go from here? We'll take a few questions from the chat. So who would like to address that first? Where do we go from here?
And so with that, there's a few things that Chief Williams and her executive team implemented in 2020 that will help us have an even better 2021 and a better future. I would really recommend, if those of you who are part of this meeting have not read the op-ed that she put out last month, actually it was earlier this month, that you to read it, because it does cover a lot of these items. But 3 quick things. One was the Center for Continuous Improvement. This was started by Chief last September. And essentially their focus is on evaluation. I see a question in the chat about, do we do formal evaluations on implemented programs? That's exactly the purpose of the CCI. In public safety and public service, there are a ton of acronyms. So if I say something, you're like, what is that? Just say something so I can explain. But this is a new division that is led by one of our police commanders who has a small team of folks. And that's essentially what they're doing. They're evaluating the work that we've done. As has been shared, Phoenix PD has done a tremendous amount of work towards transparency, towards community inclusion, towards making sure that we are being effective in the work that we do, that we're working on our employee retention and employee support, both at the sworn and civilian level. And that's our entire focus. Oftentimes we move forward, we don't get a chance to always be able to look back, and that's what that team is responsible for. One of the things that they've done a significant amount of work since September, but one of the things they've done is helping the department ensure they are in compliance with the 8 Can't Wait initiative. It came out recently in the news that Tempe had been working on that. Phoenix PD has been working on that. So people are paying attention to what community is asking for, and not always just the local community, but when national platforms are put in force or put in place because they want to see a shift across the industry, we are listening. One of the items that they're working on right now is our strategic plan. So we're hoping to have that out into the community by next month. It is definitely time to move forward and update that. Another new item would be the Community Hiring Review Board. And essentially this is an opportunity for citizens where they will be working to come in, having and being part of the interview process. So this is the new piece. We already have citizens that are involved in our discipline process, just like Chief Walther was mentioning. We've had that in place for several years, but now we're taking a step further and inviting citizens to be part of it. Now there is an application process. We do, make sure that we have appropriate persons at the table, because we do want some genuine, solid input when it comes to who is being given the privilege of being able to serve as a Phoenix police officer. And so they are going to get started actually next week. Will be the first time that we have citizens part of a review panel for that opportunity. And right now that board is closed, but if there's any interest, please reach out to me and let me know, because we may have some opportunity in the future for other community members to participate in that. And another piece is the Community Policy Review Panel pilot, which of Princess mentioned, she is part of that. And essentially we, again, with community inclusion, giving citizens an opportunity to review the policies before we change them. Everyone has a different perspective. And when we have people from different backgrounds, different professional experience, they will see things from a different angle. It's essentially part of why my position exists, to be able to bring in a different perspective and give input. And so this is giving our community members an opportunity to be able to review policies before they are changed. And it also gives a chance for us to educate those community members. I know Princess had recently put forward some recommendations on a change that we asked about, and it gave the opportunity to have some dialogue. She gave a recommendation and staff was able to write back to her and say, okay, we thank you for that input, and this is how that impacts us, or this is how, give some background about why we may or may not be able to implement that recommendation. Then she can go back and tell the community about those things. One thing that I did want to bring up is that there is this thing called the criminal justice system, and we all work together. And when we know better about how we work together, we can do great work together. And I mentioned that in the sense of there was the question in the last bit about victim services. There is a program that I think a lot of people may not know about. And I can say that because I had some staff members who came to me. We are very proactive in one of the bureaus that I work with. They were trying to find a way to raise some money for a victim that they had come into contact with. And I said, wait a minute, I just came across a program. There's a program out there. You may not need to do that. And so I can send you guys the link for this, but especially for the NAACP, as you have community members reach out to you directly for support, there's a program called the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission Victim Compensation Program. And essentially people who are victims of various crimes, usually violent crimes, can reach out to get assistance with out-of-pocket expenses such as funerals and mental health counseling. When we talk about confidence in our systems, a lot of that confidence comes from information, and the loss of trust definitely comes from misinformation. And that is something that we are working to combat. All of these departments that are involved today, and even those that are not part of this forum, that's what everyone is working towards. How can we go to a place where community and public services working in tandem? That is what we need. So even if you're out there in the street, you're out on the sidewalk, you're out at the church, you're out at the park, and you're advocating for your rights, we want to know that you believe that when the police show up, if they need to show up, that this is an agency that will come and is going to work with you, that is coming from a place of trust, that is coming from a place of relationship. And so we talk about confidence. Confidence is a two-way street. We want to work with you. I don't think there's one department that hasn't said something that's counter to that. Please be engaged as possible. When it comes to COVID, unfortunately, we're not necessarily able to engage in person as much as we were in the past, but we're here for these virtual sessions. We will do what we can to continue to stay engaged. That's the only way that we can continue to build relationship and to build confidence in the great stuff that we're doing together.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nikki.
So we'll go next.
Okay. All right.
So Nikki was right on point. She really covered a lot of great things, and I think that as we move forward and we're trying to increase that confidence between the community and police departments, that takes building relationships, and that's what it's all about. And she had alluded to that and mentioned the relationship aspect. That is huge. We have to continue to work at the relationship with the community. And the community, we need to have that feedback. I think that you have a lot of leaders now here in the Valley that want to have that communication with their various community groups. And it's having that open dialogue, free flowing back and forth to be able to discuss, some of the issues that are going on. Things that we need to work on, things that maybe the community could work better towards in conjunction with us. And so I think that's huge, especially as it relates to knowing what your rights are. I think that you can never have enough courses or classwork as it relates to knowing your rights and knowing what that should look like for yourself as a community, but then also making sure that we're keeping connected with our youth. That's important for us as a police department. It's hard to hate up close. And so we need to make sure that we're still developing and creating programs for youth, and that we're constantly staying engaged with the youth. That's an important piece. One of the things that we're doing over in Tempe is that I am actually going to be kicking off a Chiefs Advisory Board, just for the accountability as it relates to our public safety task force. And what we're doing next after that is that we're going to take those recommendations and implement that within the strategic plan, a new strategic plan for Tempe. And from that process, there's got to be some accountability to being able to fulfill those recommendations or requests. And so there will be a chiefs advisory board that'll be formed out of that. And so, that's that helps to build that public trust and that confidence, because if you're going to do what you say you're going to do, then people will look at you and say, okay, well, they legitimately are working with us, and we're moving together, as one. And so I think that's just another important aspect of things.
All right. Okay, thank you.
I'll finish up. I'll bring up the rear on that. Nikki and Jeff just spoke to just some amazing things, and I think the simple ideas in terms of where we go from here and how we get better is this: we have to be talking to each other, and we have to be communicating on a regular basis, but in genuine ways, and having a legitimate dialogue, and coming together and asking each other tough questions, and having expectations of your local police departments and what are we doing, and those things that we must be doing, and things that it sounds like all three of us are doing. It's talking about community engagement groups. I have my own the community engagement group just for the chief of police in Scottsdale that meets quarterly. Each of my district commanders has a community engagement group that they meet monthly. In the age of COVID, things have gotten more difficult, more Teams meetings and things like that. But it's group after group of engagement and conversation, and to the point where I'm having us develop a master plan related to prioritizing our focus on our engagement groups. But I think in law enforcement we've gotten very good, at least in Arizona, we've gotten very good at creating groups that we meet regularly, that we're taking input, that we're putting citizens in oversight positions and use of force, and they're really great collaborative efforts. Now I want to whittle that down. I want to come down to the small level. I like more small group discussion, question and answer, because like this, as the questions pop up in the chat box, it's great. I'm doing that within the organization as well, creating a monthly opportunity called Ask the Chief, or a fireside chat, where that opens up lines of communication with my staff about everything. And you actually hear it from me. And small groups tend to get more personalized, more intimate information that we can then share to a larger group. So there's a lot of efforts in Tempe and in Phoenix about engagement, and what does engagement look like, and we must be intentional in the dialogue and in that engagement, be they larger groups or be they small groups. Our citizenry has to see us as part of the community and not above the community. Look at the police departments across the country that have issues. I point out every time that those police departments that have issues with their community, especially communities of color, it is because they see themselves as an occupying army. And when you see yourself as an occupying army, you don't see yourself as part of the community. And you must see yourself culturally, organizationally, as part of the community for you to do any good and for there to be any trust. And those are the small things. I think Tempe, Phoenix, Scottsdale, Glendale, Chandler, they're all working on those larger group interactions and community engagement groups. And now it's time to work on the smaller group, even this panel, a smaller group for smaller discussion. So then that information percolates out to the rest of the citizenry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. With forums like this, that's our intention, is to keep communication open and promote engagement, and smaller groups do present more of an opportunity for understanding. And so we'll continue to do these periodically. And we are at a little over an hour, and there are some questions in the chat. And so I'll leave it up to our presenters. If you can stay on this call a little longer, we'll get to more questions in the chat. And I've asked our committee, one of our committee members, Carla Boatner, to manage the chat. So if you're able to stay a bit, we'd really appreciate it. And then we'll allow a few minutes for questions and then go from there.
Thank you, Princess. Thank you, Princess.
You're welcome.
I'd like to jump right in to the questions so we can get in as many as we can. The first question, what advice do you have for NAACP volunteers when hate calls are received in the office? And how do we assess our personal safety when unidentified people call and leave these threats?
Okay, if anyone wants to answer, I'm an educator as well, so I'm trying not to treat this like a classroom and call on you all. so the intent is to have it relaxed as opposed to calling on each one of you. So whoever would like to answer that question.
Princess, I can start out with that one. For calls that you're receiving, if they're hate calls and they direct violence or anything like that, we want you to call us. We are absolutely interested in all of those calls and running down those calls and determining whether a crime has occurred. We absolutely want to know about those. And so make sure that you're calling whatever jurisdiction you're in, that local police department, and talk about what the threats that you're getting. If you're able to date, times, any of just whatever information you can provide to us that'll aid in an investigation and us looking into those. The second part of that was really, I just had this conversation with council members. It's about personal safety. And so there is a very general idea about personal safety that I think that we as citizens fail at every day. And that is, we have to be, I don't want to terrify people, but everybody should be vigilant in today's day and age about their personal surroundings, whether you're coming out of work, whether you're getting into your car, whether you're coming out of your home. We have to be paying attention to the oddities that are around us. All of us know when we come out of our home, we come out of our business, we try to get into our car, we know when things don't look right. I have a good friend of mine that calls it, you got to pay attention to your spidey senses. Or an author, Gavin DeBecker, years ago wrote a book called The Gift of Fear. And so if you pay attention to your surroundings, what's going on, and those oddities, I tell people all the time, if you come out of your home and you look and you say, that's not right, or something doesn't look right around your car, don't be like the gullible teenagers in the Friday the 13th movies and continue walking toward that thing that now is going to put you in harm's way. Pay attention to those spidey senses. You have them for a reason, and we have to be vigilant, especially as I'm kind of leave it with this. There are forces out there that are doing everything they can to try to divide us. And it's essential that we pay attention to those forces to see their machinations, what they do, how they do it, how they're implementing it, because I'm not about to let them divide us, and you shouldn't be either. And they're trying to divide us through fear. And so if we fight against that and we pay attention to what's going around us, we continue to have these conversations, they will not win, we will. And so we have to be vigilant though and pay attention to those surroundings.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So Chief Glover or Nikki, would you like to add it? Yes.
Yeah, I just want to add something really briefly to that. And he's right. I mean, you definitely have to make sure that, you are listening to your gut feelings or your instincts. And there's key little things that you have to make sure of, especially when it comes to personal safety, even around your residence. Cut back those bushes, make sure you've got lights on, go back to the old crime prevention messages and everything. because, you know, people lurk in the dark, and, you know, crimes happen because of opportunity, and you have to take away the element of opportunity. And so that's an important piece to that. So when you're thinking about, you know, are you putting yourself in a bad situation, or, you know, think about, you know, when you're thinking about your personal safety, you have to sort of think in that context, and try to understand whether or not, okay, well, I haven't changed that porch light out in 2 months, but I'm going to get to it. Things like that. You know, you really want to ensure that, you know, you've got everything in place, so that way it keeps you safe. And so that I just wanted to add that piece. The crime prevention person inside me just couldn't help it.
It's
But I
important
will say we've
information.
had organizations reach out, especially during the election season, that were getting certain types of messages that were quite negative. So, like Chief Walther said, please let us know if you hear about anything. And one of the things that I want to reiterate with both of the chiefs when we talk about situational awareness, let's continue to practice our tradition of oral storytelling. You know, within the African American community, it has been our tradition to pass down stories and great anecdotes and wisdom to our youth. I know that I don't think there are too many youth, if any, on this particular Zoom call, but we need to make sure our kids get this knowledge as well. We're in this cyber age where very few phone numbers are memorized, because instead of phone numbers, we're memorizing email passwords. We need to continue to memorize phone numbers. Children need to know our parents' names. I know too many kids, they know mom and dad, but what is Jeff Glover's name? What is Jeff Walther's name? What is the home phone number? What is our address? So not taking for granted those old lessons, because they are classic and timeless. Let's continue to make sure our kids know these things. You would probably be surprised how many teenagers are not even aware of those things. So all kids need to get those lessons.
Hey, thank you very much. The next question is for Chief Walther. How many citizens are on the Use of Force Review Board? And we have a member who lives in Scottsdale and is interested.
Yes, I saw that question earlier and responded to that one, and along with my email address, so they could contact me directly, and we can talk about getting them more involved in the organization. Currently, we have 3 citizens on our general Use of Force Review Board, and then 3 on our Major Incident Review Board.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Another question, how do you feel about a private agency or outside county reviewing police shootings instead of a police agency in the same county?
Well, I'll say on behalf of Chief Williams, she and her team make that call really on a case-by-case basis. I want to say within the last 2 years, I think we've sent cases both to Scottsdale and Tempe for assistance. So it's not something that we are opposed to. If there is a particular case of concern, I would definitely recommend that you reach out to me to express your concern so I can get that information to the chief. But I know for Phoenix, it is very much case-by-case basis.
I concur with Nikki on that. We do on a case-by-case basis. Obviously, Maricopa County Attorney's Office reviews all officer-involved shootings in the Valley, and then we do. All agencies also do internal investigations, but we too have sent investigations out to other agencies, really just to increase that level of transparency. To be honest with you, I hadn't really given consideration to sending it to somebody outside the county. Although I will tell you, we have reviewed officer-involved shootings from police departments outside of Maricopa County for that, very same reason. I think we've just been blessed in Maricopa County that there are a number of exceptional police agencies that we have relationships with in the Valley, and so when on a case-by-case basis, we will send it out for another independent review, but within the county. I just can't think of a time that we've done so outside the county.
So that's the same for us, where we've done it on a case-by-case basis. Now, that is something that we have recently considered in terms of being able to look at outside the county, or having independent reviews being conducted. But you get into in terms of the independent review, you get into the cost of what that actually would look like for somebody to come in and do that, which is it is very significant when you have an independent review or body that comes in and to do that. I recently had a conversation with the AG's office, the Attorney General's office, because they were looking at wanting to pilot a program where they're doing the independent review and or doing some of those officer-involved shooting cases. It was interesting dialogue, but there's the politics though of, well, you have the Maricopa County Attorney's Office that, are the ones that are, that governing body. And so, I don't know exactly where that's going to go. It's something that they're kicking around, and they wanted to have a discussion about it. But it's very preliminary right now in terms of what that would look like and how they want to go about doing something like that. So as I have those discussions and we explore further, we'll definitely provide you that feedback as to what they're looking at for that.
Okay, thank you very much. Nikki, I know you mentioned that Phoenix conducts some formal evaluations on the implemented programs to assess the level of effectiveness or ineffectiveness. Chief Walther and Chief Glover, do Tempe and Scottsdale have the same in place, or are you working on it?
So not to the degree that they have an actual unit that is doing that for them. We're a much smaller agency. But for the different programs that we are implementing, we are starting to do more of the post-review and evaluation as to how that program is either successful, or is it sort of status quo maintaining, or is it just not working for us? And so we've gotten more into doing the evaluation process, especially as it relates to use of force and de-escalation. We have a very robust de-escalation program, and we're doing not only just the post-evaluation, we're doing post evaluation of some of our training currently that we're implementing with that program. We have over half of our department trained in a specialized de-escalation program. COVID hit. So then now we're looking at extending it and getting the rest of our officers trained in it, but they've still been conducting the evaluation on those officers that have gone through the program and evaluating it compared to those that have not. So we're getting some good feedback on it.
Yeah, we're very much the same. Tempe and Scottsdale are very similar sized cities and agencies. And so we are constantly evaluating, reevaluation, the reevaluation process of what we're doing and what's working and what's not. And to be honest with you, we'll dump it. If it's not working, we'll get rid of it. If we're not doing enough in terms of, and Jeff brings up de-escalation. Well, it's one thing, we're constantly reviewing our communications protocol on how we communicate with the citizenry, with suspects, how we're de-escalating, what our use of force tactics, what tactics are we getting rid of? There's a lot of discussion in the community across the country about what they'll refer to as chokeholds or lateral vascular neck restraints, and so we're a lot of these things we're evaluating and then getting rid of because it no longer serves what we're doing. So there's a constant reevaluation period that's going on in everything that we do, especially when it comes to use of force and any implementation of force. Yeah, so that's constant. There's a constant review process pretty much on every single thing, including workload analysis. I mean, we analyze to analyze. It's good for us, but it's also very time consuming. And then keep on top of that the city auditor's department is constantly auditing various areas within the police department, because if we're honest with each other and you look at the size of police departments in each city, they're the largest departments in the city with the largest budget, the most units, the most liability, where risk managers pay a lot of attention. And so we're constantly being audited in compliance with our own policies and standards, or do policy and standards need to be redone?
Hey, thank you. Chief Walther, you mentioned engaging with your employees to better understand the issues of concern with them. I commend you on this because not all organizational leaders make themselves that available, especially to their staff. How are you differentiating between what may be personal issues with employees and what truly may be indicative of an organizational climate that may be undermining your organizational goals?
That's a great question, and I appreciate that somebody has saw my goal here, and I have a real desire to be a social media influencer. Not really, but and so that's why I do a monthly YouTube video to my group, to my organization, and now, like I said, I'm trying to do an Ask the Chief fireside chat, and then I meet with the employee groups and their representatives at least once a month. But you hit the nail on the head, I think, for any chief, assistant chief commander, in recognizing when an employee comes to us in a police agency, and whether that what they're bringing to us is it a one-off, is it a personal issue, or is it truly a cultural or organizational cultural issue? And I'm sure Jeff and Nikki can both speak to this as well, but pretty quick. When it's, hey chief, really think that we need to go to a new outer vest for patrol, and okay, why is that? Well, I don't like this particular. Okay, are you now representing yourself, or are you representing your organization? And so communication is the key to everything, and understanding your people's motivation is the key to everything. And so there has to be regular dialogue between me as the chief executive and our employees. I'm very fortunate, Jeff and I are very fortunate. I think this is more difficult for Chief Williams, but I have 700 employees in my organization. And so 400 sworn, around 300 civilian. And so I will tell you, and Jeff, I'm sure will tell you, it's still very difficult for everybody to see me in the organization. So I must leverage our kind of internal social media or videos and things like that. But you still have to be out and have regular conversation and see and be seen. And that gives you an idea of what's going on in the organization. What are those truly cultural issues that you need to send the organization in a different direction? But it's constant communication to find out, is it personal, or is it organizational? And then I use my assistant chiefs and my commanders to really help me drill down to those things we want to change organizationally versus what's personal. I tell people all the time, if you work for me, I'd appreciate it if you liked me, but it is not a requirement. If you don't like me for decisions that I make that I think are right for the organization and the citizenry, well, that's on them. And so it's important that we recognize we work for the citizens first and the city second. And then when we get down to individual issues, hey, we'll address those when we can, and I'll get you what you want sometimes, but otherwise it's about the organization.
Thank you so much. We have one last question that I'd really like to ask, and I'd like to hear from each of you with regard to this. How are your agencies addressing issues of white supremacy, behavior by officers, association by officers in those groups?
Good question.
Anyone can start.
Yeah, I guess I'll start on that. As we have taken a look at our policies, and especially as it relates to social media, things of that nature. I mean, we are always doing audits. We're always doing checks of the officers. We're going out. We're doing a lot of, like I myself, just like Jeff is. I've gone out and I've basically have met within the 3 months that I've been there. I've met with all of the employee work groups face to face. And I'm creating what is basically an employee advisory board. So that way I have that connection, and it's going to be definitely with, meeting with me as opposed to meeting with the chain of command, because I want the unfiltered version of the information that's out there. I want to hear the rumors. I want to hear everything that's going on so these things can be addressed. And so as it deals with supremacy, the white supremacy conversation, it's more of the, what you do with the culture of the organization and how you're driving the culture. Are we going to be inclusive? Are we going to change up some things and make sure that we're grounded and we have a foundation of inclusivity? One of the things that I've done at Tempe is I started to do an assessment, and I started looking around at, there's small things that you can do. I looked at all the pictures that we have throughout the buildings in the organization. When you look at the historical photographs that we have, they're all from like 1960 or 1970. Well, in Tempe, you didn't have any Black officers then. You didn't hardly have any diversity. The department was 100% white male. So we're changing all the photos. We're looking at the photos that we have, around the department. And I had this conversation with the command staff. I was like, I'm not having a do the right thing moment, but why aren't there any brothers on the wall? So we're going through and we're changing out all of the photos within the organization, because especially as you are being socialized, so you're recruiting into the police department, you're bringing people in and you're socializing them to the organization. You want them to be able to get the right message, and so that's important. And so that's some of the just the small things that you can do to sort of help set the tone for the culture that you want within the organization. And so that's sort of how we're going about that.
Yeah, I'll just briefly echo Jeff's comments and more, and even be, I guess, very firm about the idea of officers and white supremacy, and you're gone, period. If so it's interesting to me that we still have across the country officers across the country. Fortunately, their numbers seem to be small and seem to be dwindling, that will put the craziest things on social media. And like all the agencies represented here, if it's put on social media, we're gonna find it. And especially if it's related to some type of white supremacist, white nationalist ideas, that's something that we will root out, stomp out, and get rid of you yesterday if we find it. And so there is too much at stake for law enforcement agencies in the Valley, in the state, and in the country to allow those type of things to fester. And you see it over and over and over again, where I'll use the George Floyd murder. The officer involved had been complained on so many times, and the organization did nothing or was blocked from doing things repeatedly. And that's never going to be, that's just not going to be us. If we find it, we'll root it out, we'll get to the bottom of it. And if we find those tendencies or that type of behavior or ideology, those do not go hand in hand with a police uniform and a gun and a badge today. It's just not acceptable. And I agree with Jeff. We've created, a museum at headquarters, and fortunately, though, they had the right idea over the years, and they have sections of, this is from the 50s, from the 60s, and you see that same progression of female officers and officers of color, and so thank God. so Jeff, good, yeah, that's good work. I'm glad to hear it.
Well, I'll say that I think some of you may remember back in 2019 that the Phoenix Police Department was the subject of a national review through the Plain View Project. And so that led to several of our officers undergoing internal investigation, and many of them were disciplined for that. So we have had to deal with that in very recent times of what that looks like in terms of the perception that is put out and how it's received. How's the media that you're using? How's the language that you're using? That has been a big issue for Chief Williams as we've been more transparent with body-worn camera and the videos from these critical incidents. What language are our officers using, and addressing that as best as we can? I will say, when it comes to how you can help us in terms of ensuring there's diversity within our departments, is we need you to help be advocates. I believe that policing is still an honorable profession. anything in public service, this is really sometimes a matter of the heart. And it takes all of us to really spread that information and encouragement to continue to choose public service, especially in the form of public safety, as a career choice. I don't know about Scottsdale and Tempe, but it sounds like Tempe might be struggling too. We're not seeing as many applicants who are African American, whether male or female, as we would like. It is a struggle right now. And with the things that have happened in recent years, I understand why it may not be such a draw for certain communities to make this as a choice. It's not the safest job, but it is a very rewarding job. And when we want to talk about ensuring that our departments reflect the communities that they serve, we can't do that if the applicants don't reflect the community. So help us, help all of us by encouraging our nieces, our nephews, our sons, our daughters, our husbands, our wives to consider policing as a profession. And the other part about community being proactive, if there's an officer out there that you feel is not serving the community as he or she should, we need to hear that from you. I don't think there's one department as part of this panel that does not have an option for you to let us know, especially on phoenix.gov/police. You can share that information online. Oftentimes we'll tell people, if you don't feel comfortable addressing something in the middle of a traffic stop or any other type of situation where you're interacting with the police officer, you don't have to do that right then. Yes, you could call for a supervisor, but if you really don't feel comfortable, there are other ways and routes to go about that. So if you feel that there are officers out there that are disserving the community, let us know. And on that same turn, if you feel that there are officers that truly are going above and beyond and meeting the call, we want to hear that as well.
Can I say something? My name is Dr. Johnson, Patricia Johnson, and I just wanted to add something to the conversation that is evolving, the conversation about race and policing. I would just like to add that I think that it's important to also include a conversation that in this larger conversation to include the issues of gender and class, because I think if we don't include this as a trioca of oppression, that the conversation is going to be, and the results, what we're all about, we all want the same thing. We're looking for equity and compassion, intentionality, a new way of thinking about how to police, as well as citizens, how to engage the police. So I think it's really important if we look at it, not just in terms of white supremacy, because it's going to be, the conversation is going to be lopsided. Our solutions may not be as inclusive when we begin to think about them. When I think about, I'll just quickly use poor George Floyd as an example. What if it had been Georgina Floyd? And the fact that George Floyd was a poor Black man, not just a Black man, he was a poor Black man. So that's an issue of class. So I think, as we begin to walk down this road, it has to be a conversation that has three fingers to it, not just race. It also has to have gender and class, because I don't think that you can analyze sufficiently issues of white supremacy without looking at gender oppression and the fact that class is a discussion that we, in America, we just tend not to really include as part of the discourse. So I just want to—
Okay, well, so glad. Yeah, so glad you mentioned that, Dr. Johnson, because our next book club selection speaks to all of those issues.
Good. Okay.
And they're top of mind for me because of my background and training. But this book addresses gender inequality, income inequality, how children of lower economic status, how they're treated differently. So it's a good segue into encouraging folks to read the book for the book club. And I want to be respectful of our panelists' time, and we're so appreciative that you've taken an extra like 37 minutes to answer questions in the chat. And we're going to capture the questions in the chat and make an effort to address those in some way, kind of work that out. But again, thank you so very, very much for taking out the time. And this has been very informative. I think the community has learned a lot more about what you are doing, what you're planning to do, a lot more of some of your perceptions about public safety that they may not have known about, and just overall the efforts to try to make things better. And so with these type of forums, you know, we plan on having other forums, and Zoom has been an inconvenience in some ways, but it's very convenient this way, and getting people together and making it simple and easy. And we've had forums in person. I just wanted to speak to something Nikki has said. And at those forums, we've had a recruitment table also. So when we can meet again in person, you know, we can accommodate Tempe and Scottsdale that way and have a recruitment table of officers that look like the people that you need. And so we can continue to do that to help you out as well. So again, thank you very, very much. And if you have any closing remarks you'd like to make, please feel free to do so in the next few minutes. And
I'd like to encourage people, if they have closing remarks or if they have remarks, put them
no,
in.
I meant the panelists.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
As president, let me say thank you very much. Thank you very much, panelists. And I really, it's really refreshing to hear Chief Walter, and I hope I'm saying that correctly.
Walter, that's an L.
Scottsdale Police Chief. It's very refreshing to hear you directly say that your group is interested in rooting out white supremacists. You said it straight out. You didn't dance around it. That's refreshing. That's very refreshing. And any hate group, you know, whether they're white supremacists or any other hate groups. So that to me was very refreshing. Thank you guys for coming. And I hope we need to keep this going, maybe quarterly, because we need to hear from you. And so the citizens can also express their opinions in their dialogue. Thank you again to our criminal justice chair, Princess, for pulling this together, Princess Lucas Wilson. And I just want to make a couple of announcements before everybody goes. Sorry, commercial announcements. We meet every fourth Saturday for our community meetings. We have a financial literacy series starting in February. Please watch our listserv for that and those announcements, because it's all intertwined. I think Dr. Johnson was alluding to that. Race and class and financial inequality, that's part of it, right? Mm-hmm. If George Floyd was wealthy, perhaps he wouldn't have got murdered, perhaps, right? We know that I said perhaps, okay? Also, I want to applaud Chief of Scottsdale for saying George Floyd was murdered. Other people don't have the courage to say that, okay? But anyway, come to our financial literacy presentations in February. We also have our February book club. And then we have our Freedom Fund dinner and awards program that will be April 30th. And then I'm just being very honest and transparent, because if we don't really identify the problem, and if we don't have the courage to really explain it as it is, then how can we move forward, right? And that's what we're all here to do. We're all here to work toward eliminating systemic racism, systemic classism, so that everyone can enjoy equal opportunity. And if we don't really be honest about what the problem is, we can't move forward. So thank you, Ms. Princess. and for letting me have a minute. Sorry.
Yeah, sure, sure. No, of course. Yeah, we want to be hopeful, yet realistic. So we want to do both. And if the panelists have any closing remarks you'd like to make before we adjourn.
Princess, I just want to thank everybody I want to thank you for including me, and enjoyed the conversation and meeting up with everybody again. I look forward to it in the future.
Okay, thank you.
And I second that. Thank you to the county branch, the board, the president for continued engagement. We've appreciated this relationship. Princess, we appreciate you. We've kind of inundated you the last few years in your public safety chair role over there at the branch, but you've always stepped up to the plate. And we really thank you for everything that you're doing on behalf of the community.
Oh, thank you, Nikki.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for allowing for me to be a part of this conversation. It was a great conversation. I mean, the departments, that are represented, we're all doing, a lot of work to make sure that we're staying engaged and collaborating with our community. And this is a big part of that. And so just thank you for everything that you're doing, especially you, Princess. I've worked with you for a long time, especially with a lot of these pieces in terms of community engagement and staying connected. And so just thank you for all that you're doing as well. And just look forward to doing more work with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I look forward to working with everybody as well. We have plenty to do, don't we? Okay, well, thank you. President, are you?
Just everybody, Godspeed and be safe. Take your vitamin D and zinc, right? Just
Wear your mask, wash
wear
your
your mask.
hands.
Yeah, wear your mask.
Social
Be safe.
distance.
Be safe, and thank you very much, everyone.
Yes,
Have
thank
a
you
great
so
day.
much. Yes. Bye-bye. Have a great day.